Well, hello everybody. Since yesterday morning I've been trying to make this video. I've had 4 attempts and every time I go to do the editing I've either not recorded myself, not recorded my screen, not recorded any sound and all sorts of stupid trippy things like that. The moral to that is don't go visiting your mate Billy before you start making videos is all I can say. But anyway, this is the second clip from Q&A that I mentioned in my first clip. I think it's a very important thing. It's now Wednesday and this lady didn't make any follow-up media. As far as I know, nobody's talking about it. Mind you, I don't go to The Guardian anymore, and this is the sort of thing The Guardian, The Age, the Sydney Morning Herald would jump on. I always worry when people do what this lady just did, because when I did it, the world smashed me, and that wasn't a fun experience, and that shouldn't really happen to people. And I always worry whenever anybody asks politicians about poverty who are actually living in poverty. That's actually a dangerous exercise, and unless you live in poverty you don't understand that statement. But anyway, I'm going to start this clip and react to it as we go along. I'll speed it up after she asks her question because the whole clip's quite long. It's very hard to give you an unfiltered reaction to something that I've already watched. Now this will be my 5th time. But anyway, here we go.
The load, be it cheaper medicines, in terms of what we do with childcare. I mentioned TAFE and in particular.
Let me just zoom that along. I should have just left it where it was. Here we go.
Our next question comes from Fiona Cameron. Hi, Fiona.
Hi. Why won't the government raise the rate of job seeker to match the pension? The government went to the 2022 election promising no one left behind. They left 1 million people behind on day one of the campaign with a flat-out refusal by the Prime Minister. Why was it so important to Labor to demand payments be increased at the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, but so easy to return to the pittance amount paid and then tell us to be grateful for the paltry, inconsequential increase in rent assistance?
Fiona, what's your own situation?
I'm on job seeker.
And how do you survive on it? A lot of people report that it's really difficult.
It is incredibly difficult. My rent in 2023 went from $475 a week to $600 a week in 24, and now $750. That's a 52% rent increase. I currently owe money to one of my flatmates for my share of the last quarterly power bill, and I don't have any confidence that that will be paid in full by the time the next one rolls around.
Aruna, you've done a lot of work on these payments and what needs to happen.
So, look.
Now, this lady tries to be very empathetic. She's not very good at it. And in one part of this, she explains that NewStart shouldn't be raised to the same rate as the age pension, but has no explanation as to why.
Job seeker is too low. It's low by international comparison, and we think it's too low. It's so low that it's counterproductive, right? Like we're fortunate in Australia, and I will say one thing is we are very lucky that unemployment is low in this country relative to what could have happened if we hadn't managed this period of inflation. It's been really hard. It's been really hard for people across the country, and it's been really hard for people who rent in particular. But we've come out of this period with people not having lost their jobs, and that is really valuable. And what that means is we're not actually paying that many people unemployment payments in Australia because our labour market is healthy. But that enables us to then have a look and say, when unemployment is this low, you're still going to have some degree of unemployment. And the level that we've got JobSeeker at just feels punitive, right? It feels like it's not productive, it's counterproductive. Obviously, it costs money to raise JobSeeker. It's an at-large payment. There's a cost attached to that. I will say that we should raise JobSeeker. We should also raise the money to pay for it. We can raise the money to pay for it, though. This is a choice. It's a choice that sits with all of us.
That would be a useful result of one of the windfall taxes you suggested earlier.
Well, there are a series of different options that we could use. I think that the challenge is always that, tax hits many people, and this is part of the grand bargain, really, of living in this country. Do we want it to be a country where you can have a decent standard of living even if you're down on your luck?
I have no idea what she means by the grand bargain. What the hell? Like, is that some fantasy that they have? They're grand. Here's the go, eh? We have governments so that governments can feed, house, and look after their people. If we have 5 million people in this country on or below the poverty line, that 5 million figure also includes the low income earners living below the poverty line who make they work very hard in very manual labour jobs for very little money. They're usually casual workers. A lot of them work out of illegal labour hire companies. Poor people are just treated like illegal immigrants in this country, and nobody understands how that works. Poor people are involved in a complete black market system around labour where everything's ticked on the paperwork so that the only person who gets in trouble for the dodgy stuff going on is the actual poor person doing the work. I'll do videos on that at some point, but yeah, I forgot where I was going with that, but that's what you get when I make videos. My brain's not wired correctly. I'll keep on going with this so I can work out where the hell I was in my head.
And if that's the case, and we think that should be the case, we do think JobSeeker should go up, not quite to the level of the age pension, but close enough to it.
Well, would it go up enough to allow me to get my job interview outfit dry cleaned and a haircut before I go for a job interview?
Well, that's
would
a really
it be
good point.
enough to allow me to buy all of my medications and a fortnight's worth of groceries?
Yeah, and that's the point, right? To be adequate for you to be able to be able to do the things that you need to do to live a complete life and to seek a job.
Why is it so important that money went up at the onset of the COVID pandemic, but nobody has the will to bring it back to that level again to make sure that 1 million people get the financial boot taken off their necks?
The other piece of it is rent assistance, though. So one of the things that we find is that rent assistance is also pretty well targeted to people who rent, not just people on JobSeeker, but people...
Right, rent assistance. Rent assistance is $23 a week at its maximum. In order to get the maximum, you have to be paying $126 a fortnight a week in rent in order to receive the full payment for rent assistance. Rent assistance is designed for a time when paying $150 a week rent was normal, and in no way equates. If rent assistance was paid at the same levels of when it was introduced, the actual rent assistance that someone on Social Security would get now for rent assistance would be $150 a week, based on the basis that houses now cost $500 a week to rent and more. As that lady said, her rent's $500 a fortnight. She lives with, from what I can gather from the maths, 3 people. The actual rent's $1,500 a week, or $1,500 a fortnight, and out of the 3 people, they all have to find $500 each. They sound like they're all mature age people on Social Security, which is another thing that's abnormal and really shouldn't, well, it can happen. There's nothing wrong with communal living like that, but it's not normal in Australian society to have aged people living in share houses. It's never been normal. Quite frankly, that lady should be at the top of the list for a housing commission unit. And the fact that she's not is a disgrace to us all as a society.
On the pension.
Assistance doesn't cover my rent.
That's right. So we think the rent assistance is too low.
I take home around $776 a fortnight, and my share of the rent is $500 per fortnight.
Ed, I'll just bring you in. That question which you asked, though, about, and Labor did argue, you know, for the higher payments, and during that COVID period, there was sort of very high payments given to welfare recipients compared to what is the status quo. So we've experienced what the other side looks like.
Well, I'm very conscious in answering very directly to you. The things I'll say won't necessarily wash well with you, right? So I might as well do that. I know there's a tendency, particularly in an election, to be all things to all people.
That's a nice way of saying you don't have a job, stuff you.
But let me put some of the things in terms of putting in front of you. I mean, rent assistance will never cover, and has never been designed to cover the entirety of rent. It's designed to contribute, right? Point one. Two, we did lift, as I indicated earlier, we lifted JobSeeker through the course of this term with the indexation, 5,000 plus a year, right? We have, and that's been, as I indicated as well, particularly important for single parents as well. To the point you've asked me, Patricia, so I don't forget it and I'm not seen as avoiding it. Yeah, we did lift at that point in time, but that was a pandemic. That was a once-in-a-generation impact, right? And we wanted to make sure we looked after people clearly at what was a horrendous set of circumstances. But there have been other things that we've done as well. And you're right, we made choices in terms of, for example, rescaling the stage 3 tax benefits. We didn't give them to people on really well incomes. We re-geared it to people on middle and low. And also for low-income workers, we fought for wage increases as well. We actually fought...
Does this idiot understand he's talking to somebody who doesn't have a job? He was asked specific questions about NewStart, poverty, and how people on NewStart can't afford to live in any way. The lady beside him has just mentioned how NewStart is punitive, which it is. NewStart's basically parole for the crime of being poor, but I'm sure I've made videos about that before. But the answers these two politicians give are the exact same answers. And that they're meant to be the opposite side of each other in politics. Think about that during election time. Labor, Liberal, they're both the same. As I always say in these videos during election time, I consider Labor to be just as much a danger to this country as I consider Liberal to be a danger to this country. For me personally, as somebody who relies on social security for my income, I believe that Labor is less of a danger because I'm terrified that the Liberals will get in and make mutual obligations worse, take me off my disability support pension, put me on a lesser payment called NewStart, and force me into something called mutual obligations, all for the crime of having a disability and costing the government money. I'm quite confident that Labor won't do that. In other aspects of our country, not to do with social security, Labor's just as dangerous as the Liberals. So the only option I consider to be available to us is a Labor government with a Green safeguard. And I'm not a big fan of the Greens either. But in this election, I believe, and I'm not telling anyone else how to vote, vote's a secret for a reason, I believe that's the best outcome we as the people of Australia can hope for with what they've put up. I would love for there to be a little box on the election thing saying none of the above. And if over 50% of the country votes for none of the above, then all these monkeys have to go back and find new people to put in front of us and new ideas that we actually count for. But that's how democracy would really work. That's not what's happening. I just don't want people to think that I'm supporting the Liberal Party. I'm not. But both Liberal and Labor terrify me we're in this odd world where Labor will send our troops overseas and Liberal won't. And I don't know how we got here. As an old 55-year-old man, I really don't know how we got here.
Full-throated said we should be lifting wages for those people that are on the lowest incomes. So we've pushed for that as well. And the rent assistance, while I appreciate you've got a totally different view, and I know I'm quite upfront, I know I won't convince you on it.
Isn't lifting NewStart lifting wages for those on the lowest income, considering NewStart is their wage?
Pretty big leap in terms of what we did. We're trying to do a number of things, and in terms of medicines, as you indicated earlier, we not only cut it once to $31, that was one of the biggest cuts in 75 years, we're going to cut it again, right? So for the things that matter, and I'm conscious of this because of where I live in Western Sydney, right? There are a whole combo of things that take effect, and on top of that, making sure we slice some of the cost of energy bills along the way as well. And saying all that, I appreciate fully, you may not, you may go, well, that's all well and good, doesn't change my circumstance, I appreciate I have a different view, but I would like to just at least put on the record some of the things that we've done that I reckon will lighten the load for people.
Fiona?
I guess the next question I want to ask is, did the job seeker payment go up at the onset of the pandemic because there would be another million people that have never relied on government assistance to discover just how badly life sucks on the dole?
Well,
Now, in the other videos that I tried to make but I failed to make, at this point I had a 20-minute rant, and after all these failed attempts, I'm not going to have a 20-minute rant. I'm just going to say, yes, that's the exact reason that they lifted NewStart above the poverty line during the pandemic, was so that all those people didn't know how evil. They also stopped mutual obligations, and that's the other thing. They didn't. So it's really important to point that out. They didn't want people to know of the punitive measures that people on NewStart have to go through. I have friends who don't go on NewStart because of those punitive measures. They're also in and out of jail for petty crimes constantly, because in a capitalist world you need money to live, and yeah, that's a different story as well. Here we go. Sorry.
I fully appreciate, or yeah, I get at that point in time what would have been thinking, we weren't in government at that point, was that people would be put in a situation they haven't been put before. And the concern was that unemployment would jump big time and that people would find it hard to exist.
But it's okay for us to, endure this now.
Well, Ted's also running for government. We're in an election, so I'll give him... They're in care.
She should have let him answer that question. That's the most important question of the night. Why is it okay for us to live in poverty and it wasn't okay for them? Why are we different? Why is 1 million Australians on NewStart treated like scum? I'd like to point out that half the people on NewStart aren't counted as unemployed because they're doing training or something like that via mutual obligations.
Taker right now, so, you never know who might be in charge. Ted, you could, you've matched Labor on Medicare and other things. You could go first on some of these things and force their hand. You could.
You're trying to get me in on that.
Just an idea.
Look, Tricia doesn't why shouldn't you get some?
That's right. I think I was shocked by your rent increase, by the way, because on the Sunshine case, for example, rent's gone through the roof. 27%. People having to leave. You've got dual income people living in their cars, going to work from their cars, still having to get assistance with food relief. It's,
all right, to my question,
extraordinary.
though, is it worth looking at?
I think my answer is probably similar to the one I gave Peter, to be honest with you.
I'd just like to say, people living in their cars having to go to food banks and go and get food relief, even if they've got a job, those people are in poverty. It's not a cost of living crisis. It's a poverty fucking crisis. And we have to stop allowing these elites to change the language so that everything seems nice and pretty, when in reality, what we actually have is 55-year-old women with dogs sleeping in cars because they can't afford to pay the rent in the place that they've been living for the last 15 years.
The stronger the economy we have, then the more options can be explored. The other thing I'd say too is the reason I mentioned about prices going up is Peter Dutton's focus, the coalition's focus, is a laser one to get prices down, which means what money anyone receives, whether it be through job seeker, whether it be through an income, that money can go further, can buy more. But when groceries go up 30%, electricity up over 30%, gas up over 30%, everything, rent for you over 52%, inflation goes up, you can do less with your money, which is why our objective is to get deflation down and ideally all boats lift.
All right.
Again,
Okay, the end of that recording I had to cut out because for some reason either my Camo Studio or my Clipchamp or whatever the stupid Microsoft program is for video editing keeps on stuffing up the sound at the end, and I think it's the Camo Studio at the end of long videos. I don't know what it is. I'm pretty computer illiterate. I do have to sort it out though. I'm probably going to end up recording off the computer and then adding it to, like, yeah, I'm going to have to expend some money in some proper software. But until I do that, things like this will happen. So everybody have a safe and good day. And I also have to do something about that colour changing. I apologise for that. Like I say, I brute force everything. I don't know how I don't really know what I'm doing. Eventually I'm going to have to get help from somebody who actually does. Stay safe. Have a good day. Please like and subscribe. And just remember, if you're entitled to redress, chances are you'll win a civil lawsuit. Seriously, go and see a lawyer about it. Have a good day. Goodbye.